Okay, hello everybody. This is the event that I had live is actually replacing an event that was meant to do on YouTube, but due to technical difficulties, um, we'll be here instead. And so I will try to keep this as concise as possible. And in the comments, let me know if you have any questions. Excellent. Let's move forward. So welcome. The topic of this evening's session is called Beyond Comfort, the Inner Work of Cultural Intelligence. I am Jackie Rulander, a personal development and cultural intelligence coach and trainer. Um, Born and raised in Barbados, now living in Sweden, and I have been living in Sweden for more than 14 years now, and have lived internationally for 20 plus years. I think it's like 23, something like that. I've been working with human resources and so on, coaching and so on, training for more than 10 years as well. Um, and my work is about helping individuals and teams to lead, live, and learn across cultures, not just by gathering more knowledge and information, but by doing the work of inner transformation that cultural intelligence um, demands. I'm also the founder of Thrive Beyond Borders, which has two parts to it. One part is the People Development Company, focusing on empowering professionals to live cross culturally. And the second part is the Culture Bridge Association, a Swedish association whose focus is building bridges between cultures in Sweden through cultural intelligence workshops and inspiring stories. Why are we looking at this today? Is because, I mean, this is a topic that is very relevant for us today in the world. Um, when we look around, we see that culture and integration and all these kind of things are very much watchwords, hot topics around the world today. And this idea of beyond comfort we're looking at because real growth does not come just by learning facts. If you went to school like a few years ago, you know, it was a lot about drilling information into your head, and educators have learned that that's not the only level of education or understanding, just knowing it, but being able to apply it. And that can only happen when we internalize. Sorry, learning happens when we can internalize and apply concepts to our everyday lives. The world is more connected than ever, and at times it can feel more divided than ever. But maybe it's just we're more aware of the division. Working and leading or living across cultures is not just about observing some nice etiquettes and being polite. There's a lot of emotion that's involved in it. And because of the emotion, because of nuances that are hard to spot, it can feel quite complex. Growing in cultural intelligence, which is also called CQ, uh, poses a question or poses a challenge with this question. Are you willing to grow beneath the surface? This is a little confession from my part, just to highlight why we're looking at something like this and so on, because some years ago it would have been after there was some kind of, I don't remember the exact year. I want to say it was 2016, but it was somewhere around there. There had been some bombings in Germany, I think, on a train, and then in Sweden we had like a bus bomb or a lorry or something that had been driven into something in Stockholm. And there was this idea, like we were quite worried about terror attacks and things like that. And I was coming home to my place from spending Christmas away with friends to another city. I got on the train, I hadn't paid for a particular seat. I could sit anywhere. So I was just walking through the carriages looking for empty seats. I came into this one carriage and I sat. And after a little while, a man came in, and I won't tell you exactly where he was probably from, but he was unfortunately from, let's say, a people group that people sometimes link with the terror attacks that happened. I didn't know anything about this man. Um, he didn't say anything. He didn't look menacing or anything. But immediately that thought came to my head. Ooh, what if he's a terrorist? What if he going to try and do something to this train? And I was shocked that I actually thought this, because if you had asked me 5 minutes before, I would have said no. I don't have a prejudice against this particular group of people or this particular country. And I was shocked to realize that that was the thought in my head. No, basically it's a prejudice. And a prejudice, well, prejudice is really a way of thinking that our brain creates to protect us, because that's your brain's job, to protect you. And it draws conclusions based on experiences and things that it's observed. The problem is we aren't always aware of the conclusion it draws. And I was very surprised to find that my brain had drawn this conclusion. A little bit ashamed too. And the man came in, he did his thing, he sat down, absolutely no problem with him. You know, what would have happened if I hadn't been able to confront myself about this thought? How might I have reacted to this man? What might I have said to him or done? I shudder to think. And I know that people in other situations have done similar things. Like they've made an assumption and they've reacted badly to the person, even though they know nothing about them. What I learned from this moment wasn't just something about his culture. It wasn't anything about his culture, really. It was about me, my discomfort that I wasn't even aware of fully, and my assumptions and my expectations. This is the kind of work that we're getting into. We're not just talking about being aware of culture or being aware about things about culture, but to be able to be honest with ourselves and reflect, and which lead in a way that leads to transformation. Now, discomfort. I found this very interesting piece of information talking about discomfort that comes from cross cultural experiences, and it broke it down into three areas. Now, discomfort is a kind of emotion, and emotions tell us something. It's a signal, it's showing us where our boundaries are. And so I just want to share this piece of information with you before we go much further. So the first part is that there's identity discomfort. Who am I in this place? And I definitely understand this. You move to a new place and suddenly you're not the person, or you're not in the same position. You don't hold the same position that you held in your home country. And you kind of figure out, who am I here? You might feel a little bit small, a little bit unstable, unsettled. You don't know the language, maybe if it's a different language you're dealing with. You don't know that many people. You don't know how systems work. And suddenly you feel more like a child than an adult. And that discomfort comes. Who am I in this place? The second one that comes is emotional discomfort. Why do I feel this way? Why am I reacting? It feels sometimes like everything just irritates you and just react to everything. It's like, why does that happen? It tends to happen um, when something is unfamiliar. And again, you feel insecure, you feel unsafe. And the third one has to do with power discomfort. Who has the power? Who adapts to whom? If you are in your country, there's a way in which you have power that you don't realize. Take an example of a language cafe. I know that they're popular here in Sweden. I'm not sure how popular they are in other places, but it's a place where natives or people who are very comfortable with the language meet with newcomers and help them to learn the language through conversation. They might have some lessons depending on who's doing it, but they're very much teaching through using the language, being able to speak the language. And often these people will build a level of friendship with each other. Now, if it is your country and your language and you're the person who understands how things work, you have a level of power that the newcomer does not have. You're not aware of it, but you have it. And this is a way that I'll give you a story to help you understand how that works when it comes to power and language. Some years ago, I was with a group of people from different places, different countries, and I was sitting with some of the guys. So there were, like, I think it was three or four guys from Germany, one guy from the UK, and one Korean. And the Korean was had been learning English before coming to this place, And he was working on his English a lot, but he still wasn't 100% comfortable with it. But he could, listen to conversations. And we were chatting, and somehow, I don't remember how it happened, but kind of, I ended up talking to someone else or went off in my own mind somewhere. So they continued talking, and then the English guy got up and went to do something. So it was these four Germans and this Korean guy, and one of the Germans turned to another German to say something in German, of course. And the man replied to him in German, and they started talking in German. And then the other two got involved, and they were all talking German with the Korean guy still right there with them. And I remember turning around and seeing him, I don't even know how to describe it, like sink into himself because he had no clue what they were talking about. English was hard enough for him. Now they were speaking a language that he had never learned. He was not the one with power, and this tends to happen in ways that we don't understand. We don't always know how we're reacting to this power, where you feel like your power has been taken away in some way. Another part of this is a touchy subject, I know, but we're just going to talk about it for a couple of minutes. It has to do with privilege. Often when people talk about culture now and immigration and race relations and so on, they talk about privilege, and it can feel quite prickly for a lot of people because sometimes I've heard people say, I'm not rich. I didn't grow up rich. What do you mean I'm privileged? It's not that kind of privilege. It's not privilege about money. It is about an advantage that you have, that you were born with, that the other people or person does not have because they weren't born with it. So if you're born in a country and you grow up in the country with people who parents who speak the language and relatives and friends around you who speak the language, you learn the language just because you were there, not because you were rich or there was anything, significant or weird done to make you learn this language. This was a part of your growing up. And so you have that privilege of knowing the language. Someone else coming in is at a disadvantage. You see, you have that advantage. They're at a disadvantage because they're now living in the same country. As adults, they probably have to do similar things like pay taxes, go to the bank, go to work, and so on, find a job. But they don't have the language. It's a disadvantage for them. So when people talk about privilege, they're really just talking about an advantage that someone has. All right. Let's take a look at cultural intelligence because it is essential for navigating diverse environments and fostering meaningful connections across cultures. Dr. David Livermore is a well respected CQ researcher and trainer, and he defines cultural intelligence in this way. He says the capability to work and relate effectively in culturally diverse situations. Ang and Van Dyne, in their Handbook of Cultural Intelligence, so that cultural intelligence is an individual's capability to function effectively across national, ethnic, and organizational cultures. And it has four capabilities that researchers have defined. And they've surveyed people across, I think the last time I read it was 98 countries in different situations and so on. So they've come up with these competencies. And the first one is CQ drive, interest in other cultures and perspectives. CQ knowledge, learning about cultural norms and values. CQ strategy, strategizing based on understanding. And CQ action, adjusting behaviors in diverse settings. Now let's take a little bit of a closer look. CQ drive is your level of interest, motivation, and confidence to persevere through cross-cultural situations. It's your motivation, it's your level of motivation. The more motivated you are, the more you're likely to invest your time and energy in the other competencies as well and to develop them. There are people who are not at all interested in other cultural situations. And it can be noted that there's some of us who might be interested in, like, culture is just exciting and interesting and you want to meet different people and different cultures. And then some people, they're very specific about which culture they're interested in. Okay. CQ knowledge. is your knowledge about how cultures are similar and different. And this is the one that most people tend to focus on when they talk about learning about culture, gathering information. So it's about the terms, culture shock, culture clash, cultural fluency, cultural intelligence. You understand these kind of terms. You understand things like hot and cold climate, that terms that were used before, and um, time conscious, and all these kind of fear, power, fear, guilt, innocence, and honor, shame cultures. You understand these kind of terms, and you understand the concept of cultural values. The next one is CQ strategy, and this is your awareness and ability to plan for multicultural interactions, to strategize how you're going to interact in these situations. Mm-hmm. It is basically your ability to apply your CQ drive and knowledge to make sense of the situation. And this includes not just knowledge of the other culture, but of your own culture. There needs to be some introspection, quite a lot of introspection actually, to be able to apply that knowledge to come up with an effective strategy or strategies for how you're going to interact with the people or the culture in general. And then CQ action is your ability to adapt when relating and working in multicultural context. Your ability to use your strategies to put specific actions into play. Um, and this one is particularly important because sometimes we can learn something about a culture, and this is where just having high knowledge is dangerous. They've actually said that just having high knowledge can be dangerous and be worse than if you are low CQ in all of the areas. Because you can have some knowledge about a culture and you meet the people and you start to do a few things that you think are right, but you have such a limit to your knowledge that you don't really have a good understanding of the nuances and the breadth of the culture, which can cause offense for the people or make you look silly. How many times have people felt like they understood another country and and they tried to say, I mean, saying the greeting is probably fine, but try to say something um, that ends up being offensive, or try to mimic the culture in some way, and it's just offensive to the people because either because of the timing or who is doing it, or because there are things in culture that are just for the people of that culture. That's very important to remember. Or we just haven't understood the nuance of it, and so we've done it in a way that's super offensive to the people. So, what does it look like to grow in cultural intelligence? It's not that I have all the answers, but I'm hoping that this information can be helpful to someone. It's a little bit like going to the gym to develop muscles. You know what I mean? There are three practices that would help in terms of the inner work. The first one is awareness, being able to recognize your own cultural biases and perspectives. This is very important in the CQ knowledge and strategy part. When are you reacting to um, something that you think is universally true, but it's actually just true in your own setting? Is this person really um, being um, dodgy or untrue, or are you just interpreting their actions from your perspective, your cultural perspective? Empathy is being able to understand and appreciate others' cultural experiences and values. There's this what do you call it? This idea of cold climate and warm climate cultures that I've heard about for years and so on. And I remember when I first came to Sweden. Sweden is a cold climate, and we were talking about some of the differences. And one of the differences is that people in cold climate cultures, it is said, tend to be more time conscious. And there's another classification, it's like, oh, more people culture conscious or more time conscious. And I remember hearing someone say, oh, yeah, people in Sweden care more about time, people in these other places care more about people, which we might think is true, but especially when you think, oh, these guys here in Sweden aren't as, they're a bit rude because they don't do things in a way that we think is polite. But when you realize, for example, if someone passes you in the street and bounces into you, and in my culture, you should stop and say, I'm so sorry, and kind of placate the person. But in Sweden, there's a good chance that they'll just walk on. And someone explained it to me once, and it gave me such a perspective there. It said, they've already disturbed your day enough by bouncing into you. Why would they disturb your day even more by stopping you and having a conversation about it? You probably have somewhere to go. I mean, if you're on your way to the train, then you might end up being late. So the idea of being time conscious is because of the culture, not just the culture, but the weather that changes. You have to be aware of time. If you don't plan in time, you don't get fed, that sort of thing. So people, because they're in Sweden, because they respect people, one of the ways they show that is by respecting their time. And when I began to understand that, I share that with others, that it gives you a different appreciation for the people. And then adaptability, being able to adjust your communication and style to fit diverse audiences. It doesn't mean that you as a person have to become a different person, but just being aware of who you're talking to and how do I need to change my communication so that this person or people understand and can receive what I'm saying. Three practices to consider when you feel this discomfort. One is to pause. And this is just very practical stuff right now. In the moment when you're feeling that discomfort, pause. As your brain, as your mind tries to draw conclusions, take a moment to pause. Try not to let don't lose your mind kind of thing and just blow up in anger. Let your try to see their perspective a little bit. So what else could be true here? I'm drawing one conclusion, but could there be another perspective here, another reason for what they're saying and doing? The second one is to stay present. It's so easy when you're in conversation with someone and it feels like it's becoming a conflict or you're feeling uncomfortable. It's so easy to just zone out or to seem like you're listening to the person or you're still in the moment, but you're just planning what you're going to say or plotting your revenge or whatever it is, but you're just zoning out for the moment. Stay present, even when you feel uncomfortable. Remain in the conversation. Try to get all the facts and understand the situation better. And then the third part is not so much to fix it or to figure out who's right or oh, it's their fault, I was right, they were wrong, but what is this moment revealing about me? Like I said early on, this guy on the train, I had to think about why my mind was jumping to that conclusion about this man, even though I knew nothing about him. And I realized it's because of things that happened recently with the bombings and so on. I hadn't really sat and thought about it, but it's like, yeah, it is a safety concern, and your brain is making that connection. It has nothing to do with the actual man or his culture. So those are three very practical things you can do in this moment as you start to interact cross culturally with people, or not start to, but continue to interact cross culturally with people. To be culturally intelligent, we need to be present. It's not about performance. It's not about someone saying, attaboy, tapping us on the back, or saying you're doing a good job. It's us being present in our interactions and having empathy, understanding that these are people like us, and being able to, or being willing to see past our initial reactions. Okay, so um, I know we don't have a lot of interaction here, so what I'm going to do is just put up some questions for you to think through, whether you're somehow watching it now or watching it later on. These are some questions you can consider for yourself. What kind of discomfort shows up most often for you in cross-cultural spaces? Remember, we talked about identity discomfort. Were you wondering who am I in this space? The emotion in terms of what emotions am I feeling, what emotions are being stirred up, or power. Am I at advantage or disadvantage? Do I feel powerless in this situation? And then the second question is, where do you notice a gap between how you want to show up and how you actually do show up? Hmm. And then the third question, what small shifts could you practice in your next cross cultural interaction? Is it being present and really listening? Remember, when listening, we're practicing active listening. Is it um, taking a moment to pause? See what I did there? Taking a moment to pause and see if there's another perspective that you have somehow missed. You know, is it thinking about what is my part in this? Is it about practicing empathy when it comes to shift? What about recognizing your own cultural biases and perspectives? How will you do that? How will you be able to adjust your communication style to fit the audiences that you interact with now? All things for us to consider. Okay, so doing this kind of work is not simple. I've just gone through this very quickly right now, um, because I had to start late. And again, I apologize for that. I I'm not really sure what went wrong technically. So if you have questions and so on, I feel free to make contact with me. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can send me a friend request or send me a private message. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can send an email to jackie.rulander@gmail.com. On Instagram, not as much as on Facebook or LinkedIn, but I'm still on Instagram, so VetCraft is the name there. And YouTube, Thriving Beyond Borders. So this video will be available on YouTube as well, and I'll put the link for that uh, in the event, as because these days Facebook Lives only last 30 days, so I will let it live on YouTube in the long term. And post a link in on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So maybe this was a nice time for you to think through some things, but what happens now? If you are in my Thriving Beyond Borders Facebook group, there is a file there with some reflection questions you can look at. If you would like to have it, just send me a private message on Facebook or LinkedIn. You can also email me, of course, which is great because then connect with me. They have said that you can improve your cultural intelligence. It's completely possible to improve it. Coaching and training are a big part of how we can improve things like that, especially when we're doing the personal reflections. And I am involved in that. So if you are somebody who's in a place where you want to improve, even if you're not currently feeling super stressed by some weird foreigner or some local that you don't understand, but you feel like I want to grow in this, for me personally, but also because I work with international people, and and there's a lot of research saying that the more culturally intelligent you are, the better you will do in business, with international business. Uh, and you want to grow in that, please send me a line, send me a little message, and let's connect. If you work with cultural intelligence, you work with cross cultural um, issues and concepts, I would love to network with you as well. So please feel free and make contact with me. I'm going to do one more session of this before going on vacation. So there'll be another session in July. I'll post the dates and so on soon. And by that time, I'll definitely have figured out what the confusion was with the live stream that was supposed to be. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. Thank you so much for your interest in cultural intelligence and in growing in that and doing the work. And I wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Uh, Thank you. Have a great rest of the day and see you around.